Let's say that the term permaculture is a relatively new one to you, but you've become interested in it and you've been doing research and reading, and as you do, there are all these terms are popping up. This design, and there is principles, and there's ethics, and there's zones, and all those things, and as you dig into these things, you become overwhelmed. Hello everybody, this is Farmer Pedro here at St. Isidore Homestead and Permaculture, and I'm standing here next to the blackberry patch. It's blackberries are starting to ripen and getting these beautiful, juicy, super sweet berries that piece of heaven right here. I'm just standing here because I wanted to feature precisely what's going on here. We had a perennial system here, blackberries. We have a hoop house that's in production. We have tomatoes in that hoop house, and behind me there's these chickens are moving every day, and so all of these elements are working to help each other. That's what permaculture is about. One definition of permaculture is that of a land management system that involves a significant amount of design aimed at mimicking nature. That is a very helpful concept in that it involves an element of sustainability, it involves an element of interaction, or I should say integration of elements, and it also brings in a human element to that. So community is part of that large definition of permaculture. That basic concept has informed our farming practices ever since we started our market garden back 7 years ago. So what we do in our farm is we grow food, integrate in many different species and many different crops. We integrate animals with technology, but always aiming at some kind of sustainable practices. In essence, we're on board with this concept of permaculture, and we found it very effective in achieving our goals of growing food sustainably, efficiently, and being able to provide food to others. We do follow permaculture practices as outlined by some of the founders and people who invested a lot of time and effort into this area. But as a Christian, I embrace permaculture from a different angle. You see, the idea of being the designer and creator of something that resembles nature or as modeled after nature is something that I find daunting, and to be perfectly honest, gives me a great deal of anxiety because it's almost like I'm playing God. Instead, I focus on fulfilling my role as steward of the land according to God's plan for humanity. So I'm here as a servant rather than a creator and designer. And that, my friends, is such a liberating feeling. You have no idea. It has helped us grow as a family as well as individually, knowing that we're doing this for the greater good and that we are contributing to make this a better world. When you study the history of monastic life, for example, what you have is people who have dedicated their lives to serving God by caring for others, by caring for God's creation, by caring from the land, by producing food. Utilizing techniques are essentially commonplace, most of which will come from observation of the surroundings. There's a set of 12 principles of permaculture practices. I won't get into them, but perhaps for today we can dwell a little bit on the first one: observe and interact. This is a critical thing, and yet so obvious. When you're confronted with the environment, you're gonna have to learn the environment before you can adapt to that. What you're gonna do is you look around what you have to work with, and then you proceed accordingly. You just don't come tearing down walls or tearing down trees just for the sake of your vision, of your goals, of what agriculture is. Because ultimately, what we're creating is a community, and we cannot create a community by destroying one existing one, right? For example, right behind me is this tree that was not that big when we moved in 8 years ago in this place. It's a sycamore tree, and this tree is at the center of our old garden. To this side, to my left, is what we call the permaculture garden. To my right, we have a more recent area where we have hoop houses. In the middle of them is this beautiful sycamore tree. And to me, when we moved in, what came to mind was the story of Zacchaeus and climbing the tree or so. So I could have taken this tree down when I came here and maximize or make our growing space more efficient. And yet, I didn't. And the reason was, well, it's something to talk about, something to meditate, which is something that I do quite a bit here. This tree is certainly one of the highlights of the farm. When people come for tours or so, we play games, find the sycamore tree. And so the tree itself helps us bring communities, build communities. We talk about the story of Zacchaeus and how this man who was short in stature wanted to see the Lord so meaningful, right? So he climbed on one of them. And so here it is, our sycamore tree, the one that if you climb on this tree, you can actually see the entire farm. So you get to see all of God's creation in it. It's such a beautiful thing. So our sycamore tree then is a centerpiece in our design. With some of those basic elements, we went about what else are we going to do here? Obviously, we had to think about issues like water. Where are the slopes in our land? Where does water want to stay? Where are the wet spots? It's just a matter of identifying that. To me, the garden is first and foremost a spiritual space. I come out here to pray. I come out here to be close to God. God and nature are closely connected in creation history. So we see God manifest him to Moses for the first time in a mountain. We see Jesus retiring to pray to a garden. And so I find the garden a very spiritual, sacred space. I spend a great deal of time here just talking with God. This is great because I get to hear the voice of God too. The voice of God is present in the wind, in the birds, in the insects. As I was working on designing this place, I not only heard those sounds, but I also pay attention. For example, the wind. Where does the wind is coming? And so I would take significant time to think about those things, to thank God for the gift of wind. What is important about that? Right here where I am, we have prevailing winds that come from the west, which is to my right. And so in incorporating elements of design then, there are crops that need to be protected from the wind. So in order to protect all that is to my left, I had to create a wind barrier. And so here we have two high tunnels. They span about 110 feet long. They are providing that wind protection to everything else on the east side of them. From our observation of the surroundings and in praying over the things that we needed here to fulfill God's plan, we also understood that all those buzzing sounds that we hear, all those insects play a major role in the ecosystems and in the environment. And so if we were going to clear, say, some land to put some garden beds, that meant that we're going to be moving these insects out or encouraging them out, which was something that seemed to go against what was already in place here. And so what we did then, just by sheer observation, was, well, we're going to allow as many spaces as we can for vegetation to grow wild, for weeds to grow and thrive, and for those things to attract insects, beneficial insects, and for the most part they are going to help out with the things that we're introducing here. As a result, we have these incredibly diverse ecosystems where you see a variety of things and lots of wildlife and everything that seems to like it in here. So this is a place that makes you want to be around. And you know what? That is precisely what God wants, for us to be around, to share this with others, and to have a space where He dwells, because God is here too. That was the thinking, that was the process, and that was how we realized that even though permaculture seems to have systematized all those things, which is absolutely crucial, that I think is very, very important, but we came to really embrace this as we approach that from the perspective of our Christian beliefs. The end result is that we have an abundance, we have a diversity, we have a spirit of community, and we have a great deal of joy. Even when things don't go as planned, we take them as not our plan, but God's plan. Part of what we have to put up with in this life is struggles and is a suffering. So we see those things as opportunities. And so, do you need to go through all the permaculture training to establish a sanctuary like this? The answer is no. What you have to do is simply listen to God's voice and just follow accordingly. That's what monastic life has been all about for centuries, and so we have a great deal to learn from that. Can we benefit from having a permaculture design course? Absolutely yes, and I encourage all of you to do that. But I think there's so much more to gain if you start with the premise of, I need a place where I can come and be at peace spiritually. I can be close to myself, I can be close to God. A place that can be nourishing both spiritually and physically. But remember, we're not just talking about your nourishment, we're talking about the nourishment of every living creature around it. That's the key. We're creating this for all to benefit from. And I think that's the key to permaculture. And I think that's the key of God's design for our interaction with the natural world. God put us here so that we can benefit from everything that we have, but we also have the responsibility of taking good care of it. In the process, we have to be aware that by doing this, we are in the actual presence of God. This is our own burning bush. This is our own sycamore tree. God is here. And so when we come out knowing that we're going to encounter Him here, we're also everything is going to work out. Even when crops don't do well, or when you have a drought, or you have high winds, or when you have all those things, God is with us. And that, my friend, is what I want to share with you today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you come back. Blessings to you.